Feminism have been existing in this world by taking up different mediums, and presumably it is most apparently seen in films. Films influenced by feminist theories started to experiment with the societal pressure on gender roles by switching the conventional code belonging to each gender. This was seen earlier in the late 1930s, where a wave of screwball comedies took over Hollywood. One of the best examples of this is a film called Bringing Up Baby, which starred one of the most prominent figures in Hollywood during that time, Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. A screwball comedy is a genre of comedy that rose to popularity during the Great Depression, where it often depicted social classes in conflict. Later on, as it transitioned to the 1980s, romantic comedies were in a different style than the 1930s. There were no longer frequent appearances of the fast-paced repartee which has defined the screwball comedy, but instead, films became a bit more sophisticated. The physical comedies such as slapsticks or repartee became more subtle, and instead, it focused more deeply on the subject it was dealing with. An example of this is seen in Rob Reiner's When Harry Met Sally. Bringing Up Baby and When Harry Met Sally were created in different times, 50 years apart, but both embodies certain similarities of the genre of the romantic comedy. This can be seen in their use of mise-en-scène and the storyline of both films. In both films, the depiction of the gender dynamics between the male and female characters are almost the same. These tend to be expressed through mise-en-scène. In Bringing Up Baby, David embodies a sort of a nerdy character, which brings down his masculinity. David wears glasses, which is a conventional code directly linking oneself to nerdiness. In the early part of the film, Susan is almost always shown wearing beautiful gowns in white colors. This establishes her identity as a wealthy and beautiful lady, and her extravagant gowns bestows her a sort of a feminine power. And When Harry Met Sally, Sally's clothing is a little bit different. Her clothes do not try to make her look exactly feminine, but looks more practical and masculine. Her clothing choices implies that she is a woman who values her own choices and beliefs, an independent woman of the 1980s. Therefore, both of their clothing gives them a feminist look. A scene in When Harry Met Sally establishes her feminist character by not just the clothes, but the kinds of books that scattered around her in the bookshop and even the book she is holding. Other than the mise-en-scène, the actions which the characters of both films take or how the characters are portrayed tends to overlap each other. And When Harry Met Sally, Harry is not exactly the same character as David. In fact, on the outside, he seems to be more of an ordinary man of his age. However, when considering his responses to certain situations, he seems to maintain a passive posture. He does not fight against the belief that men and women cannot be friends, but accepts it firmly.
Great, friends. It's the best thing. You realize, of course, that we can never be friends.
Why not?
What I'm saying is, and this is not a come on in any way, shape, or form, is that men and women can't be friends because the sex part always gets in the way.
That's not true. I have a number of men friends and there is no sex involved.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Well, I think you do.
You're saying I'm having sex with these men without my knowledge?
No, what I'm saying is they all want to have sex with you.
They do.
Do too.
They do.
Me too.
However, when a situation happens when Sally wants to sexually engage with him, even though that is contradicting Sally's claim, he does not object but rather gives in. That does not seem like he's actually enjoying it or being passionate about it. Instead, Sally seems more passionate and happy at the end of the engagement, while Harry has a neutral response to what just happened. This is a moment where the gender roles have swapped. Traditionally, it was the female who was passive in a sexual interaction and the men who dictated the interaction by showing more passion and aggressiveness. He is also seemingly passive about the fact that his wife has cheated on him. According to Harry's conversation with his friend, which is the first time he mentions his divorce with his wife, Helen, it is not sure whether Harry has actually had an emotional outrage on Helen. Instead, he didn't stop Helen or object to any of her opinions other than accepting it and letting her do whatever she wanted. Therefore, Harry is depicted as a submissive male figure. This submissive male figure is applicable for David as well, as he does not object or try to convince his fiancée when she refuses any kinds of romantic activities in their future marriage.
You mean?
I mean of any kind, David.
Oh, well, Alice, I was sort of hoping. Well, you mean children and all that sort of thing?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
This will be our child.
Huh?
Yes,
Oh,
David.
that's
I
nice.
see our marriage purely as a dedication to your work.
Well, gee whiz, Alice, everybody has to have a honeymoon and
But we haven't time.
oh,
Speaking of time, you have an appointment this afternoon.
have I? What for?
To play golf with Mr. Peabody.
Overall, both films have certain similarities within their depiction of the genders, and the characters in both films share some resemblance. Despite the 50 years gap, both films display the conventional topic of romantic comedies, which is the battle of the sexes. And in this, they both portray a feminist female figure who does not let herself be controlled by the men or society, but solely depend on their own thoughts and beliefs.